The night was quiet, but not peaceful. John walked through the forest path, his lantern in one hand and a bag of tools in the other. He was not looking for adventure. He was only searching for firewood. But destiny had other plans. Somewhere deep between the trees, a strange sound echoed. It was not the cry of an animal, nor the call of any bird. It was soft, trembling, almost like the voice of children. John froze, his heart beating faster. The sound came again, sharper this time, mixed with fear. He felt the hairs on his neck rise. Who would be out here at night, crying like that? Slowly, he moved toward the sound, his boots pressing against the fallen leaves. The forest grew darker with every step, the shadows stretching long and thin. John held his lantern higher, whispering to himself, maybe it's just kids lost in the woods. But something deep inside told him it was not human. Finally, he reached a small clearing. The cries were louder now, clearer. There, near a broken tree, he saw them. Two small figures, curled close together, their bodies trembling. Their skin was pale, but glowing faintly, as if light lived beneath it. Their eyes, wide and shining like silver moons, stared at him with fear. John gasped and almost dropped his lantern. They were not human children. They were alien. For a long moment, he could not move. The girls, because they looked like young girls, pressed closer to each other. One whispered something in a language John could not understand. The other shook her head, her glowing hair falling over her shoulders. John realized they were just as afraid of him as he was of them. Then he heard it, a low growl from the forest edge. Yellow eyes stared at him from the dark. A wild predator, drawn by the cries of the alien girls, was ready to attack. John's instincts took over. He dropped his bag, pulled out a broken branch from the ground, and lit its tip with the lantern's flame. The fiery stick glowed bright, casting long shadows. The beast snarled, stepping closer, its claws scraping the soil. John stood between the girls and the danger. His heart pounded, but he held his ground. With a shout, he swung the firebrand. The beast roared, backing away. It circled once, then vanished into the trees, its eyes fading into darkness. John lowered the burning stick, his breath heavy. He turned slowly, looking at the two girls. They were staring at him, their glowing eyes wide. One whispered softly, a word broken but clear, safe. John blinked, shocked. Did she just speak English? The smaller girl tried to stand but stumbled, her legs weak. Without thinking, John stepped forward and caught her. Her skin was warm, almost too warm, and her body light as if she weighed nothing. The other girl reached out, touching his sleeve with trembling fingers. John realized they were starving, tired, and scared. I won't hurt you, he whispered, though he was not sure they could understand. But the girls looked into his eyes, and something passed between them, a fragile trust like a small flame in the dark. John knew he could not leave them here. He lifted the smaller girl into his arms, while the other walked close, clinging to his jacket. Step by step, he led them back through the forest. The night was colder now, and every sound made him tense. But he walked faster, determined to reach his cabin before anything else found them. Finally, after what felt like an endless journey, he reached the small wooden house he called home. He pushed the door open, the lantern casting light over the wooden walls and old furniture. The girls stepped inside slowly, their eyes scanning everything with curiosity and fear. John shut the door behind them, locking it tight. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to breathe. The girls sat on the floor, their glowing eyes still fixed on him. They spoke softly to each other in their strange language. The words flowed like music, but carried sadness and fear. John brought them water, holding the cups carefully. At first, they hesitated, but then one took a sip. Her glowing skin brightened for a moment. The other followed, drinking slowly, their small hands shaking. John realized then they were not dangerous. They were lost, weak, and in desperate need of help. Who were they? Where did they come from? Questions filled his mind, but none had answers. All he knew was this. Tonight, his life had changed forever. As the fire burned in the small cabin, and the alien girls slowly closed their glowing eyes to sleep, John sat in silence, staring at them. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but deep in his heart, he felt a storm of mystery, and he knew this was only the beginning. The cabin was quiet, but John could feel the weight of silence pressing against him. The two alien girls sat near the fireplace, their glowing eyes reflecting the soft flames. They looked fragile, their faces pale, and their small hands clutched tightly together as if letting go would mean being lost forever. John moved slowly, not wanting to startle them. He placed bread and fruit on the wooden table, food he had stored for the winter. The girls watched with suspicion, whispering in their strange musical language. When John gestured to the food, they hesitated, then crawled closer. The younger one picked a piece of bread and sniffed it. Her silver eyes flickered, and finally she took a bite. The older one followed, tasting the fruit carefully. As they ate, a faint glow rippled across their skin like tiny sparks of starlight. John stared in awe, realizing that even their bodies responded differently to nourishment. He sat on a chair, watching them closely. They were not ordinary travelers. They were something far beyond his world. Part of him wanted to ask questions, but he knew they would not understand. Instead, he whispered softly, "You're safe here." The girls lifted their eyes, and though they could not speak his words, they seemed to understand the meaning. As the fire warmed the room, the girls began to relax. The younger leaned against the older, eyelids heavy. But even as they dozed, John noticed how their bodies tensed at every sound outside. A branch snapping, the wind howling, a distant owl's cry. Every noise made them flinch. It was clear they were running from something or someone. Later that night, John heard them murmuring in their language again. He listened carefully, trying to catch any familiar sound. Then, a word escaped their lips that froze him. "Hunter," whispered the older girl, her voice trembling. John's heart tightened. Were they being hunted? By what? Or by whom? He did not know, but fear in their voices told him the truth. Danger was near. He stood, moving to the window. The forest outside was dark, but John could not shake the feeling of eyes watching him from beyond the trees. He locked the shutters and secured the door. Then he returned to the girls, who now huddled close to the fire. The older one looked at him and spoke again, her English broken. "Safe, man," she said slowly, her voice fragile. John felt his chest tighten. They trusted him, even if only a little. And in that moment, he knew he could not abandon them. The night grew colder, and the fire crackled. John placed blankets around the girls, their glowing skin dimming as they fell into uneasy sleep. He stayed awake, listening to every sound, his hand never far from the old rifle hanging on the wall. Hours passed like shadows creeping across the room. Each time he closed his eyes, he imagined glowing eyes in the forest, claws scraping at his door, voices calling for what he now protected. When the first light of dawn crept through the cracks, John felt both relief and dread. The girls stirred, their silver eyes blinking open. They seemed weaker in the daylight, their glow faint, but their fear just as sharp. John gave them water again, and they whispered their thanks in soft tones. He could see exhaustion carved deep into their small faces. They were children, far from home, carrying the weight of fear too heavy for their fragile shoulders. John sat at the table, rubbing his tired eyes. "What have I done?" he muttered. He was just a man living alone in the woods. Now, he had two alien children hiding under his roof. If hunters were truly after them, they would come, and when they did, they would bring danger beyond his imagination. Yet when the girls looked at him, eyes wide and trusting, John knew the choice had already been made. He would protect them, no matter the cost. He would fight if he had to, because sometimes humanity is not measured in strength or power, but in the courage to stand for those who cannot. Outside, the forest remained silent. But in the silence, John felt the storm building, and deep down, he knew that this night was only the beginning of something far greater than himself. The morning air inside the cabin was heavy with silence. John had not slept much, his eyes were red, and his hands shook slightly from exhaustion. But when he looked at the two alien girls sitting on the wooden floor, he felt something stir inside him, a strange mix of fear and responsibility. The younger girl, her silver eyes glowing faintly, touched the old rug with curious fingers. The older one sat beside her, protective, her gaze never leaving John. He realized she watched every movement he made, as if testing whether he truly meant them no harm. John placed a small bowl of warm soup on the table, steam curling into the cold air. The smell filled the cabin, simple food, but comforting. The younger one's eyes lit up. She reached forward but waited for her sister's approval. Finally, the older gave a small nod, and together they moved to the table. John pushed the bowl toward them gently. The younger took a spoon and tried clumsily, spilling half on the table. Her sister whispered something in their language, correcting her, then carefully guided her hand. John watched quietly, a strange warmth growing in his chest. He spoke softly, pointing to the soup, food. The younger tilted her head, repeating slowly, foodie. Her voice was shaky but clear. John smiled, nodding, yes, food. The older girl frowned in concentration, then whispered, safe man. John froze, the words heavy in the small room. He had heard it last night, but now it was clearer, more certain. They were learning, reaching across the gap of language. For a moment, something fragile yet powerful passed between them. It was no longer just fear, it was trust. John felt it in their eyes, in the way they dared to speak his words. And though they were alien, their fear, hunger, and hope felt painfully human. Later that day, John showed them the cabin. The younger girl giggled softly when she touched the rough wooden walls, her glowing fingers leaving faint traces of light. The older followed carefully, her steps light, her gaze cautious but less hostile now. John found himself speaking to them even though they might not fully understand. This is my home, small but safe, he said, pointing around. They repeated softly, home, safe. The words clumsy, but the meaning undeniable. As the sun set, John lit the fireplace again. The girls sat close, whispering to each other in their flowing language. John listened, hearing patterns in their speech, gentle and rhythmic. He wondered what their world was like, what kind of life they had before fear brought them into his woods. But the bond was not only in words, it was in gestures. The younger girl handed him a small stone she carried in her pocket, glowing faintly with blue veins of light. John looked at it in awe, the stone warm in his palm. He tried to give it back, but she shook her head, pressing his hand closed. A gift, small but meaningful. The older one nodded, her silver eyes softening. That night, John felt the shift clearly. They were no longer just strangers under his roof. They were becoming something more, something like family. Yet the fear in their eyes had not vanished. Each time a branch cracked outside, their bodies stiffened, their glow dimmed. They were still running, still hiding from something. John knew he could not protect them forever if danger came. But for now, he promised himself one thing. He would give them safety for as long as he could. When the girls finally slept near the fire, John sat in silence, the glowing stone resting in his hand. He felt the weight of destiny pressing on him, heavy and unshakable. This bond was more than chance. It was the start of something larger than his lonely life could ever imagine. The night returned with a heavy silence. John sat by the fire, the glowing stone from the younger girl resting on the table. He could not stop staring at it, its blue veins pulsing softly like a heartbeat. It was beautiful, but it also made him uneasy. If this stone was part of their world, then perhaps it was a beacon, something that could lead others here. The alien girls slept near the hearth, their small bodies curled together for warmth. Every so often, the older stirred, her silver eyes flashing open at the slightest sound. Her instincts told her danger was never far. John felt it too, the kind of tension that settled deep into the bones. Hours passed, and just when the forest seemed calm, the silence broke. A distant hum carried through the night, low and vibrating. John stood quickly, heart pounding. The hum grew louder until a pale light cut through the trees outside. He rushed to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to see. Above the forest, strange shapes moved, dark silhouettes against the stars. Not planes, not helicopters, ships. Alien ships, scanning the ground below with sweeping beams of light. John's breath caught. They found them. He whispered under his breath. The girls woke instantly, their glow brightening with fear. The younger clutched the older's hand, whispering words in her language, trembling. The older looked at John, her eyes wide, her lips forming a single word he now understood all too clearly. Hunters. The beams swept closer, crawling across the forest floor like searching eyes. John grabbed his lantern and quickly motioned for the girls to follow. No noise, stay close, he whispered. They didn't understand every word, but his urgency was clear. The girls clung to him, their small hands gripping his coat tightly. He led them through a trapdoor hidden beneath the rug. The wooden planks creaked as he pulled it open, revealing a narrow tunnel dug years ago for emergencies. Go, he urged, guiding them down. The air below was cold and damp, the earth walls pressing close. John followed last, closing the trapdoor just as a bright beam of light swept across the cabin walls. They moved through the tunnel, the sound of his boots and their bare feet crunching against soil. Every few steps, John looked back, listening. Above them, faint thuds echoed. Heavy footsteps, more than one. The hunters were not just in the sky. They were on the ground, too. The tunnel ended at a wooden hatch hidden beneath thick brush outside the cabin. John pushed it up carefully, peeking through. The forest was alive with shadows, tall figures moving between the trees. They were armored, their bodies glowing faintly like the girls, but colder, sharper, dangerous. In their hands, weapons glimmered with unnatural light. John froze, his breath shallow. He counted at least 3, maybe more. One of them paused, scanning the ground, the glow from its visor sweeping dangerously close. The girls pressed against him, their trembling bodies making it harder for him to stay still. Quiet, he mouthed, holding them close. The armored figure moved on, its heavy steps fading. John waited until the forest grew quieter again, then slowly guided the girls out. They ran deeper into the woods, branches snapping underfoot. The night air was cold, their breaths fogging in the lantern's faint glow. Every step felt louder than thunder, every shadow a threat. Then came the sound, footsteps behind them, fast and relentless. The hunters had picked up their trail. The older girl looked back and whispered something sharp and fearful. John didn't know the words, but the meaning was clear. Run faster. They reached a rocky slope, the forest thinning ahead. John pulled the girls behind a fallen log, pressing them low. The hunters' voices echoed nearby, mechanical and cold, their language harsh. The glow of their weapons sliced through the dark, closer, closer. John's heart thundered in his chest. He gripped the burning branch he had carried again, his only weapon. It was useless against such enemies, but he refused to give up. The younger girl pressed the glowing stone into his hand again. Her silver eyes locked on his, her lips moving softly. Safe, man, she whispered. John felt a rush of determination. He had no idea what the stone could do, but at that moment he trusted her. He held it tight, and the glow flared brighter, spilling across the forest like liquid fire. The hunters stopped, their visors flickering, their weapons crackling as if disrupted. John stared in shock, realizing the stone was not just a gift. It was power. The girls pulled him forward, urging him to keep running while the hunters reeled in confusion. Together they vanished deeper into the forest, leaving behind the chaos. John's mind raced. What had he gotten himself into? Who exactly were these children, and why were such powerful beings hunting them? The night swallowed his questions, but one truth was clear. This was no longer just about keeping two alien girls safe. It was a fight against something far greater, and John had no choice but to stand in the middle of it. The forest was restless. Every tree seemed to whisper warnings as John led the alien girls deeper into the darkness. The glowing stone in his hand had saved them, but it pulsed strangely now, as if alive. The girls walked close to him, one holding his sleeve, the other clinging to his side, their trust binding them together. They finally reached a clearing near the edge of a river. John stopped, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. He looked back toward the forest, half expecting the hunters to appear again. But the night was silent, only the rush of water breaking the stillness. The older girl touched his arm, her silver eyes serious. She whispered a word in her language, then pointed at the sky. John followed her gaze. Above them, the stars seemed to tremble, shifting like ripples in water. Then, slowly, a great shadow emerged, a ship descending with no sound, its form blending into the night. John's stomach tightened. He pulled the girls closer, shielding them instinctively. Was this another group of hunters, or something even worse? The ship hovered above the clearing, and from its base, a beam of soft white light poured down. The ground shook as a tall figure appeared within the glow. Her form was elegant, towering, her body radiating energy. Unlike the hunters, she did not carry weapons, but her presence alone made John step back. Her silver eyes glowed brighter than the girls', her hair flowing like strands of light. The girls gasped, their voices breaking with relief. "Mother!" They cried together, rushing forward. John stood frozen as they embraced her, their glowing bodies merging into her aura as if they truly belonged. The tall woman knelt, wrapping them in her arms. Her expression was fierce, but filled with tenderness. She spoke to them in her language, her voice deep, carrying power, yet soothing like music. The girls answered quickly, their fear melting into tears of joy. Then the woman's gaze shifted, and her silver eyes locked on John. He felt his breath catch. There was no hatred in her look, but a weight that pressed against his chest like a storm. She rose slowly, still holding the girls, and stepped toward him. John tightened his grip on the glowing stone, unsure if she was friend or foe. The older girl tugged her mother's arm, speaking hurriedly. John caught one word, "Safe man," repeated again and again. The woman paused, her gaze softening slightly. She lowered her head in a gesture that felt both regal and grateful. Her voice, when she finally spoke in broken English, echoed like wind through mountains. "You protect my children." John's mouth went dry. He nodded slowly, still tense. "I did what anyone would," he said, though deep inside he knew not everyone would have risked their life. The woman raised her hand, and the glowing stone in John's palm flared brightly. It lifted gently from his hand, floating in the air, spinning slowly. The girls touched it, and the stone hummed like a living heart. The mother looked at him again, her voice firmer now. "You hold gift of life." John frowned, confused. "I don't understand," he whispered, but the woman's gaze told him he soon would. The hunter's shadows flickered at the edge of the trees again, their glowing armor breaking through the dark. The girls cried out, clinging tighter to their mother. John's instincts screamed at him to run, but the woman stood tall, her aura expanding. She raised her hand, and the light from her body exploded outward. The hunters froze, their weapons sparking uselessly, their armor cracking under the pressure of her power. Within seconds, they vanished, retreating back into the forest, defeated without a fight. John stood in awe, the truth hitting him hard. This was no ordinary mother. She was something far greater, a protector, a leader, perhaps even royalty among her kind. And he, a simple man from Earth, had saved her children. Her silver eyes softened once more as she stepped closer to him. "You save, they live," she said, her words heavy with meaning. "I give reward." The girls smiled at John, their small hands reaching for him. And in that moment, he felt something more powerful than fear. He felt belonging. The clearing glowed with soft light from the tall, alien woman. The two girls clung to her sides, their small faces calm for the first time since John had found them. But John himself stood frozen, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. The woman's eyes, bright silver and filled with something ancient, never left him. "You, safe man," she said slowly, her voice rolling like thunder hidden in clouds. "You give life to my daughters." Her words were broken, but the meaning was clear. John shifted uneasily, his rough hands tightening at his sides. "I only did what I could," he muttered, though inside he knew he had risked more than most would. The glowing stone floated between them now, spinning slowly in the air. The woman touched it, and the stone shone brighter, filling the clearing with waves of blue light. The ground seemed to hum, the trees swayed as if bowing. John shielded his eyes, his heart racing. "What is this?" he whispered. The woman extended her hand, palm glowing. "Gift," she said firmly. "For you." The stone drifted toward John and pressed itself into his chest. He gasped, stumbling back, clutching at his shirt. But instead of pain, warmth spread through him. It was like fire and water, storm and silence, all at once. Images exploded in his mind. Galaxies spinning, stars being born, rivers of light flowing through endless space. He saw worlds not his own, cities built of crystal, skies alive with colors no human eyes had ever seen. John dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. His body trembled, but his mind soared. For a moment, he felt the weight of the universe pressing against his thoughts. Knowledge, impossible knowledge, poured into him like a flood. He saw how the hunters tracked energy, how their weapons worked, how their ships bled power from stars. And then, deeper still, he saw something more, technology that could heal, create, and even bend the fabric of life itself. When the vision faded, John collapsed forward, his hands sinking into the dirt. His breath came fast, his heart pounding as if it might burst. The girls rushed to him, their voices anxious, their glowing hands touching his arms. The warmth of their touch steadied him. Slowly, John raised his head, his eyes wide with shock. What did you do to me?" he gasped. The woman lowered herself, her voice calm. "I show truth," she said. "You now carry light of stars." Her hand touched his shoulder gently, and he felt the energy again, though softer this time. Used to protect or destroy. Choice is yours. John's throat was dry, his mind a storm of questions. He looked at his hands, still faintly glowing, trembling with power he could not understand. "I'm just a man," he whispered. "How can I hold something like this?" The woman's gaze softened, her silver eyes glowing like moons. "Because you save when no one else would," she said simply. "Because my children call you safe man." The word struck deeper than any vision. John's chest tightened, his eyes burning with emotion he could not name. He looked at the girls, their faces full of trust, and for the first time, he understood the weight of what had been given to him. It was not just a reward, it was a responsibility. Above them, the sky trembled again. Distant ships moved like shadows against the stars. The hunters had not given up. John clenched his fists, feeling the strange energy pulsing within him. He no longer felt helpless. Fear still lived inside him, but alongside it was strength. Something new, something beyond human. The woman rose to her full height, her aura casting silver light across the clearing. She looked at John one last time, her voice firm. "Now, you are more," she said. "You carry gift beyond imagination." John swallowed hard, his breath steadying as he stood. The girls hugged him tightly, whispering "safe man" again, their voices soft but full of meaning. John placed his arms around them, his heart steady despite the storm above. For he knew his life would never return to what it once was. The universe had opened a door before him, and he had stepped through. The night sky burned with distant light. Alien ships drifted above the forest, silent but watchful. John stood in the clearing, the alien girls beside him, their mother glowing with quiet strength. His heart beat like a drum, but now it carried something more, the pulse of the gift inside him, the echo of stars. The woman's silver eyes searched his face, calm yet heavy with meaning. "You hold great light," she said, her voice both command and warning. "Now you choose." Her words fell into the silence like stones dropped into deep water. John clenched his fists, feeling the strange power humming under his skin. "The choice," she said, but what choice could there be? The girls looked at him with hope, their glowing hands clutching his sleeve. "Safe, man," they whispered, as if his decision mattered more than the sky itself. John swallowed hard, his throat dry. He thought of his life before this night, a quiet cabin, a lonely man forgotten by the world. And now, here he stood, carrying a gift no human had ever known. The hunters had retreated, but John could still feel them beyond the trees. They would come again, and next time in greater numbers. This gift, this impossible power, could save not only the girls, but perhaps his entire world. But with such power came danger. Would humanity use it to build or to destroy? He turned to the woman, his voice low. "If I take this gift back, if I share it, what will happen?" The woman's gaze did not waver. "Your kind will rise," she said, "or fall." Her words were truth, sharp and unbending. John's chest tightened, the weight of decision pressing against him like a mountain. He wanted to believe in humanity, to believe they would choose creation over destruction. But he had seen greed, he had seen cruelty, he had lived through silence and abandonment. Would they see this gift as salvation, or would they turn it into a weapon? The girls tugged at him gently, their silver eyes shining. They did not see him as a soldier or a leader. They only saw him as the man who stood between them and death. The man who gave them food, warmth, and safety. And in their eyes, John found the answer. He would not keep the gift hidden, nor would he hand it blindly to those who sought only power. He would guard it, protect it, and share it when the time was right. Not for governments, not for armies, but for people who needed hope. Because hope was the one thing that could not be turned into a weapon. John lifted his head, his voice steady. "I'll carry it," he said firmly. "I'll use it to protect, to save, but never to destroy." The woman studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "You are one of us now," she whispered, her voice softer than the night wind. The girls embraced him, their glowing hands against his chest. John closed his eyes, letting their warmth steady his heart. The woman raised her hand, and a beam of light surrounded her and her daughters. The ship above hummed, preparing to leave. The older girl looked at him one last time, her lips trembling. "Safe man, we come back," she promised, her voice small but certain. Then, with a flash of light, they were gone, vanishing into the night sky. John stood alone in the clearing, the forest silent again. His chest still glowed faintly, the gift alive within him. He looked at the stars, brighter now than he had ever seen. The world he knew was no longer small, no longer forgotten. It was connected to something greater, something infinite. The hunters would return, he knew, and when they did, he would be ready, not just as a man, but as something more, a protector, a bridge between worlds, a safe man, carrying a gift beyond imagination.